April 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing. Berlin burns. The Allies close in. And the oceans that once belonged to the Kriegsmarine have turned into graveyards. But somewhere in the gray waters of the North Sea, a shadow slips away from Kiel Harbor, longer than a football field, armed with electric engines and batteries bigger than any built before. It moves in total silence. Its name, U-3008. The submarine's mission, unknown. Its destination, classified. And within 72 hours of departure, it vanishes. No distress signal. No wreck. No trace. Allied intelligence can't explain it. Radio operators report strange bursts on frequencies they'd never seen before. Fishermen swear they saw a metal whale speeding underwater at impossible speed. Some say it was destroyed. Others whisper it escaped, carrying technology that could have changed the outcome of the war. But one thing is certain. This was no ordinary submarine. It was the weapon that arrived too late. A machine so advanced it didn't just dive beneath the waves. It dove into history itself. And when it vanished, so did Germany's last hope of turning the tide. The disappearance of U-3008 wasn't just another wartime loss. It was a puzzle that sent shockwaves through Allied intelligence. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercepted fragments of strange transmissions, bursts of static, broken words in German, and coordinates that didn't match any known naval routes. Every time they tried to track the signal, it vanished, like the sub itself was diving between frequencies. Reports began piling up from across the Atlantic. Merchant ships claimed sonar, contact with something enormous moving underwater at unrecorded speed. Destroyers dropped depth charges and heard nothing, no explosions, no debris, just silence. Some Allied officers believed Germany had developed an engine that didn't need air, an underwater weapon, capable of crossing the ocean unseen. Others dismissed it as paranoia, a ghost story born from exhaustion and fear. But the truth was far stranger, because deep inside Germany, engineers were building something that could stay submerged for weeks, not hours. Something that didn't need to surface to breathe. A submarine so advanced that it made every Allied vessel, every sonar, every radar instantly obsolete. And that ghost the British thought they saw? It wasn't a ghost at all. It was the future, surfacing ahead of its time. While the Allies searched the seas, the truth was hidden in German shipyards. What they were building wasn't just another submarine. It was the Type XXI, the world's first true submersible warship. Every other submarine before it was basically a surface ship that could dive for a few hours. But this monster? It was designed to live underwater. Streamlined hull, hydraulic torpedo reload systems, and battery banks the size of train cars. The Type XXI could stay submerged for 3 straight days and travel silently for hundreds of miles. Its top underwater speed? 17 knots. That's faster than most Allied destroyers could even move on the surface. The design looked like something out of the Cold War, decades ahead of its time. Sonar-absorbing coatings, oxygen regeneration systems, and an electric drive so quiet that Allied sonar operators sometimes thought they were hearing whales. To the engineers who built it, this was the miracle weapon that could turn the tide. A fleet of invisible predators capable of cutting off Britain's lifeline before D-Day ever happened. But by the time these steel beasts were ready to hunt, Germany was collapsing, factories were burning, and shipyards were falling into Allied hands. The war had entered its final weeks, and the weapon meant to save the Reich was surfacing into a world already lost. By early 1945, the Type XXI wasn't just a submarine, it was Germany's final gamble. Hitler demanded 100 operational boats before summer, convinced they could cut off Allied supply lines and force peace. But outside his bunker, reality was disintegrating. Allied bombers turned shipyards in Bremen and Hamburg into rubble. Skilled laborers were drafted into combat. Power shortages left factories dark. Even the Baltic Sea, once a testing ground, was filled with wrecks. Engineers worked underground by candlelight, assembling batteries the size of cars, while explosions shook the ceiling above them. Some slept beside their blueprints, refusing to leave the workbench. Others were executed for defeatism when they said it was already too late. Of the 118 Type XXI hulls that began construction, only 2 were ever fully completed. One of them was U-3008, the sub that vanished, and as Soviet tanks closed in on Berlin, it became clear the miracle weapon would never sail in time to change the war. But that didn't stop the Germans from trying. In those final chaotic weeks, a handful of crews were ordered to flee west, not to fight, but to surrender to the Americans before the Soviets arrived. Some obeyed. Others disappeared beneath the Atlantic, leaving behind nothing but an echo, and a question history still hasn't fully answered. In May 1945, the war in Europe ended, but for Allied naval officers, the real shock was just beginning. As Germany surrendered, entire fleets of unfinished submarines were discovered hidden in fjords and harbors, among them 2 fully functional Type XXI U-boats, U-25-113 and the long-missing U-3008. When American and British crews boarded them, what they found was staggering. Inside was a control room lined with advanced sonar, automatic depth regulators, and oxygen systems that could sustain life for weeks below the surface. The hulls were coated with synthetic rubber to absorb sonar pings, an idea no Allied engineer had even imagined. The U.S. Navy immediately classified the discovery. Under Operation Deadlight, dozens of captured German subs were towed out and scuttled, but not these 2. They were quietly shipped to America for study. Naval engineers in Portsmouth and Key West took one look at the Type XXI and realized they were staring at the blueprint for the next 50 years of submarine warfare. Within 2 years, the U.S. launched its own GUPPY-class subs, near replicas of the German design. The Soviet Union followed soon after with the Whiskey-class, born from the same captured technology. Germany's miracle weapon hadn't changed World War II, but it did change every war that came after. Officially, U-3008 was just another captured submarine used for testing. Unofficially, its story only got stranger. In late 1946, locals near Key West reported seeing a German U-boat patrolling American waters, crewed by U.S. sailors flying no flag. They weren't hallucinating. The Navy had quietly recommissioned U-3008, testing it against its own destroyers to study its revolutionary stealth. The results were terrifying. The sub repeatedly slipped beneath U.S. sonar and destroyed entire task forces in mock battles. One admiral described it as a weapon 20 years too early. And then, as suddenly as it reappeared, U-3008 vanished again. Declassified files decades later revealed it had been intentionally sunk off the coast of Florida after its technology was fully dissected and copied. But that didn't stop the rumors. Some claimed a sister ship escaped to South America, carrying Nazi scientists and gold under the code name Operation Seawolf. Others believed the Americans hid the truth to cover how much of their Cold War tech came from German engineering. Divers in the 1980s discovered twisted steel wreckage matching U-3008's shape, resting in deep water just miles from Key West. Not destroyed by combat, but by design. It had fulfilled its final mission, to disappear once more, taking its secrets to the bottom of the sea. The Type XXI never fired a shot in anger. It never sank an Allied ship, never saved the Reich, never changed the outcome of the war it was built for. But its shadow stretched across every ocean for the next half-century. The American GUPPY-class, the Soviet Whiskey-class, even the British Porpoise-class, all borrowed the same lines, the same batteries, the same underwater speed that U-3008 had pioneered. When the nuclear age began, the Type XXI's DNA lived on in the USS Nautilus, the first submarine to cross the North Pole. Its heart beat inside every Cold War sub that followed. Historians later called it the blueprint for modern undersea warfare, a weapon that arrived too late to win its war, but just in time to define the next one. And in a strange way, that's what makes it haunting. The last creation of a dying empire ended up shaping the superpowers that replaced it. In the end, the U-3008 didn't vanish. It simply changed flags and changed history. Because even when the war was over, the future was still underwater.